Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to Tuesday night in the Prog seat. We've got a fun topic today. And in the house, we've got Chuck Alvarez.
Greetings.
George Lamie.
Hey.
Stephen Reid.
Hello.
The Doctor of Prog, Ken Golden. And I am your host, Pete Pardo, as always. So thanks for watching, everybody. We got a fun show today. This is actually an idea given to us by Anthony Ferraro, who is not with us here today, but this was actually his idea, and we kind of like it. So what if we were to go and look back on the year of our school graduation, you know, whatever kind of graduate, whatever it's called, wherever you're from, high school graduation, whatever, the year that we graduated regular school before we moved on to other things, either working or college, that sort of thing. And what were the 5 prog rock, prog metal, jazz fusion albums that we either really listened to back in the day in that year, or years later have some of our favorite albums that happen to come from that graduation year that we really like quite a bit. So we all, I think, have different years, if I'm not mistaken. We'll see in a second. And I think we, you know, because we're all, some of us are kind of the same age, some a little younger, some a little older. I think that'll make for some good picks here, and it'll be interesting to see what everybody's favorites are from their graduation year. So we're going to go in the same order that I just introduced everybody. We're going to go Chuck, George, Stephen, Ken, and myself, and then we'll go round and round and round till we get to number 1. So Chuck, first of all, I got to let everybody know what's your graduation year.
1988, High School of Art and Design. 1988. But both Anthony and I are both the same age. That would have been his year as well. My first one, I didn't actually hear in 1988. Which it was an album that I heard probably like 2 or 3 years later. When I actually started when I actually started college in 1991. I didn't go to college straight after high school, so I was just done with it. But and what's an album that I did discover was It Bites, Once Around the World in 1988. Which a lot of people heard of them from opening up for Jethro Tull. You know, I didn't see Jethro Tull in 88 or 89 or 90 or whatever year that they toured for them. But this is a band right over here, It Bites. Francis Dunnery on guitar. What's a group? What's a kind of a strange group, kind of like a Yes meets Van Halen meets 10cc. But this is the album right over here, their second album, Once Around the World, It Bites.
I saw them on my honeymoon.
Oh, you did?
I was in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
I was in London on my honeymoon, and Lauren and I, we went to 2 concerts, both at the Hammersmith Odeon.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Robert Plant, and It Bites opened up, and it was really cool because Jimmy Page came out for the encores, and then like a night or 2 later, we saw Hawkwind.
I was just going to say, cool. Was this the same honeymoon? Because we heard the Hawkwind story before.
And then we went to Paris. I saw Didier Lockwood in Paris. Anyway, but I just got to tell one quick funny story about It Bites, because I didn't really know who they were. And they opened. And Francis Dunnery, I mean, he was doing all the Guitar Hero posturing, you know, and they weren't my cup of tea. They never were my cup of tea. But they were playing like they were like the heroes, man. And I turned to the guy next to me and I said, I've never heard of these guys. Are they famous here? And he looks at me and he goes, mate, I never heard of them in me life. They did the set and they left, and then Plant came out and he tore the place up.
As usual.
and Francis Dunnery made that connection with Robert Plant. I guess they
played with each other quite a bit. He played the the acoustic guitar with him a few times.
Sure. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, that's fine. Actually,
that's
fine.
I was going to say It Bites were actually a chart band over here for 5 minutes as well, because calling all the heroes was a hit.
Yeah. Oh God,
that was a hit. And I mean, they were on top of the pops and all this sort of thing. And then they released the albums and confused the life out of everybody that had bought their singles. You know, Ian St. Louis and all this sort of stuff. And it was just, never happened for him after that.
I mean, I think they've confused listeners for decades, right? I mean, it's like, on one hand, they're kind of like this cool pop rock band. On the other hand, they've got this whole prog thing going on. They're kind of heavy in spots. It's like, what are we? And but a lot of people,
they were never really popular here.
No,
not here. Yeah, not at all.
No, not at all.
They had releases, but
yeah.
This is probably the most that people know about them. I know that there was like an EP that I have on album which had probably 3 or 4 songs on it from this album. The title track is the song that people tend to go to because it's probably their most epic track, Once Around the World. 15 minutes. It's pretty damn good. So that's, other than that, they're a strange band.
I'm laughing here because I've seen them twice since they come back with John Mitchell. And they played the same venue both times, the ABC2 in Glasgow, which unfortunately burnt down a few years back. And both times they came on really late. They had a co-headliner at both shows. And the first time they got so they couldn't play the encore. So, there was the tower was about to be pulled. And then the second time they did exactly the same thing. So they pleaded, can we play one more song? And of course they pull out the 14-minute song, didn't they?
of course.
There you go.
The old trick.
They got to finish it, but they were not popular with the venue.
Not to deviate from the topic at all, but Stephen, you got to clear something up for me. So you just said the magic word and brought me back to, I did a show here on the channel yesterday. And in that show, it was one of the live album shows, and I was talking about some performances. I think it was on Rush Exit Stage Left. They recorded some of the songs in Glasgow. So I made this whole thing about saying, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but I'm pretty sure you taught me that it's Glasgow, right?
Yes.
So then I had 3 people that's not the way you pronounce it. It's pronounced Glasgow. And they spelled it out. G-A. I mean, so how do you pronounce G-L?
Well,
How do you
I'm
pronounce
Scottish, and I'll tell you that it's Glasgow. People from Glasgow, what do they call it? Glasgow? They kind of do, I suppose. A West Coast accent and an East Coast accent are really quite difficult. They don't get on very well in that sense. If people do, well, some of the people do, but the accents don't. So yeah, I'll probably get told off for it too. Glasgow.
Yeah.
I'll call it Glasgow.
I was thinking that I'm losing. I'm like, all right, so I've been told by Scott that it's Glasgow. Now it's Glasgow. I'm like, I don't know what the hell it is.
It's definitely not Glasgow. That I'll tell you.
I know it's not Glasgow because I was told that a long time ago. All right, I wasn't gonna go there. So I thought I was being kind of cool. I was like, all right, I'm pronouncing this correctly. And then it's like, no, that's not how you say it. It's Glasgow. And I'm like, what?
Glasgow.
I'm really confused now.
No, it's not Glasgow. No.
All right, for those of you who kind of tried to correct me yesterday, well, there you have it. So whatever. Anyway, I'm going to say it the way I'm going to say it. It's Glasgow as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, now that let's get back on topic. George, what's your first choice for today, and what's your graduation year?
I am class of 86 from Lane Technical High School. Number 5, Vinnie Moore.
Nice.
Good one.
Nice.
This is in almost the ground floor of the Guitar Hero era that would soon get to be kind of boring and repetitive, but this is before all that. Great lineup. Tommy Aldridge and Andy West, rhythm section. Tony McAlpine on keyboards and Moore playing guitar. He's a real clean picker. Style-wise, it's neoclassical based. Heavy in parts, definitely proggy. Yeah, just a good bunch of songs, and one of the very early Shrapnel Records albums that they based many years on after this. So mine's for me, still is best.
Yeah, same here. I say the same thing. Excellent album.
Might be the most musical out of all of them, in my opinion.
So good melodically.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, good choice. Yeah. All right, Stephen.
Well, I was just going to say, I bought mine's on vinyl when it came out.
Me too.
And it played it a lot. And unfortunately, it just developed a whole load of sticks and jumps across it, which I'm here to this day for no apparent reason. And I was at a friend's house and we were playing Risk or something like that, board game. I was 13 or so, round about then. And funnily enough, this the older brother of a friend put that album all on cassette, and he'd recorded his own vinyl copy of it, and it jumped and stuck in exactly the same place as his mine. So there was obviously a mispress that had come through that, with a bit of wear, showed the same issues. And it was fascinating because I looked at him and he was like, "What's wrong?" I said, "Did you record my album?" "It's not my record you have." He was like, "How do you mean?" I said, "I can tell you where all the jumps are." But there you go. Anyway, sorry, I'm going.
But you know what? That's a really good topic. So, and we got Ken here, and he's like a vinyl aficionado. So when I was, so this was 1979 or 80, whatever year Paul McCartney and Wings Back to the Egg came out, I asked my father, that was probably, I think 79. So I was like 13. So I asked my father, he used to work in New York City, down over by City Hall. You remember JR Music, Ken?
Sure, downtown, sure. Great
Yeah,
stuff.
so my father would go there whenever I wanted a record. He'd pick me up what I wanted. So he brought me home the brand spanking new Back to the Egg. I put it on my turntable, and the first song, Getting Closer, skipped in like 5 places. Old Siam Sir skipped in a couple places. There were like 3 songs on it that skipped like crazy. I'm like, "Dad, I can't listen to this. It skips all over the place." He went. He returned it the next day. He brought me back another copy. It skipped in the exact same places. He returned that one, got another copy. It skipped in the exact same places.
So that's bad.
He's like, "I'm not bringing any more back. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it's our needle or something like that." So for most of my life, I remember those songs with the skips in them. And then when I finally got the CD, I almost couldn't deal with it because I'm like, "Whoa, I've never heard it like that before." Because I'm getting caught, my salamander. I'm like, something's wrong here. So,
I feel like we're having a little therapy session here. Is that why you don't have a turntable now?
has nothing to do with that. But I did have similar instances with other albums. But I think
Yeah,
my question is, why does that happen? Is that a press?
Because you didn't put. It's obvious. You should put a quarter on the head shelf.
Well, yeah, I heard that much.
No, you probably the table wasn't level, and you probably didn't have the proper tracking force. So there was probably some dynamic element going on in the grooves that was causing it to skip. Yeah.
As for your situation, Stephen, I don't know, because it wasn't even, it was you unless you guys had the exact same slant or player. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, last thing before I actually talk about what we're meant to talk about, it's funny talking about just listening to albums and you hear it without those jumps now, and you're like, "What's this?" A good friend of mine, who's still a good friend of mine, way back when Master of Puppets came out, he played guitar along with it all the time, and he used to take the needle back and play the same bits and take the needle back. And he actually ruined the record. It had lots of little jumps in it. And to this day, he can play that album with the jumps.
That's a mark of a good player right there, huh?
Yeah. Oh, he is a good player, actually. He is, yeah. But anyway, so on topic. Right, okay. So my year is 1991. Okay, we don't call it we didn't call it graduation here. We kind of do proms and things over here now. My kids had proms. Basically, my school was just pleased to get rid of me and just don't come back. So 1991 is my year, and I found this interesting because I hadn't given it much thought until we sat down to do this. Pearl Jam 10, Soundgarden, Bad Motor Finger, Nirvana's Nevermind, Temple of the Dog. That's 1991, not for me, but for rock music. That's 1991. So my prog life in 1981 was quite bare. So I went and thought, will I do a nostalgia piece and try and talk about the albums that I was listening to then, or will I go and pull out the albums that I've bought since? Well, I'm going to do the former because the latter doesn't really exist. I have very little from 1991 that falls into this category in any of this. So this is a journey back in time for me, because this is what I was listening to back then. So my first one is, no great surprise for anybody, is a Marillion album. So this is Holidays in Eden. So
very underrated.
Yeah, it is very underrated. It's seen as a pop album. And it's seen as a pop album because of No One Can and Dryland, which are pop songs. And the band themselves kind of say it's their pop album. They were forced in a direction, and was it right, was it wrong? But I mean, Splintering Heart is a fantastic opener. Cover My Eyes was a great lead single. The Party is a nice little kind of sideways track. And then you've got This Town, The Rates Progress, and 100 Nights to close it out on a proper piece of prog. So another great performance by Steve Hogarth. Steve Rothery is a little muted on it, but he's still very good. So that's my number 5. I played this a lot back then, and probably more than it maybe deserved at that stage, but I learned to love this album. So Holidays Need, my number 5.
Can't go wrong with that one. All right, Ken.
Well, so I'm going to take everybody in the Wayback Machine. I graduated high school in 1977. Oh, George, calm down. I'm still alive, I know. So I went to Jamaica High School in Queens, and every day on the way home, well, almost every day, I shouldn't exaggerate, I used to get off at Union Turnpike and walk down to the Music Box, which was the local record store, where we used to play pinball and buy some joints, and we used to buy things like this. We used to buy bootlegs. This is Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I got show and tell here, of course. A lot of Genesis bootlegs.
Look at that. Wow.
I don't know if you guys remember any of these things. They predate all of you. They're older than all of you. But all Genesis. This was a great one. This was from 77, Wind and Wuthering Tour. Here's The Lamb, double album, Swelled and Spent, classic. From the Birmingham Hippodrome. Genesis White Mountain radio broadcast, BBC, 1976. So that was like my entree. And 77 was a fantastic year for Prog. So when I started to do this, when Pete told me what the theme was, I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be pretty easy. But it really turned out to be incredibly hard because there was so much stuff that once I hit about 20 albums, and I mean 20 great albums, I just said, this is getting ridiculous. So now I had like Sophie's choice. How do I choose? So here's what I decided. Yeah. I like to take the road less traveled. So this is what I'm not talking about tonight. I'm not talking about Rush or Farewell to Kings. I can't find my copy of the album, so I'm holding up my CD here.
Notice the sticker still on it?
Well, this came out of inventory. I have the album. I just can't find the damn thing. I don't know where the hell it is. Genesis, Seconds Out. Not talking about that tonight. Not talking about Yes, Going for the One. Not talking about Pink Floyd, Animals.
Crazy.
Not talking about Peter Gabriel, his first album. Actually, the only thing I will mention about, if anybody could find the super disc version of this on vinyl, the version of Slow Burn that's on here is about a minute longer than any other version that ever came out. They were given a set of masters that were totally different than anybody else's. So anyway, I don't want to talk about those albums because, they're like in the Mount Rushmore of Prog. We could spend an evening talking about each album, and frankly, what else do we have to say about Animals or Seconds Out? I mean, they're classics, right? So we'll all acknowledge it. So I decided that we've talked about it ad nauseum, so let's talk about something a little different. So everything I'm going to talk about tonight, I would say, is a spectacular album for me. And, your mileage may vary. So my number 5 came out in 1977. Camel, Rain Dances. So that was the album that followed Moon Madness. They gave Doug Ferguson the axe on bass, and they brought Richard Sinclair in, and they brought Mel Collins in. And it's still a Camel album, very much a Camel album. But because of Sinclair's vocals and all, it does have a little bit of a Canterbury feel. And sometimes I see Camel listed as a Canterbury band, and they're not. They have nothing to do with Canterbury. No. The fact that Richard Sinclair was in the band, and you have Mel Collins adding sax and flute, so you get a little bit of that, maybe Caravan stylistically, crossing over. The songs are a little shorter, but it's a great Camel album. They were trying for something a little more commercial, and people seem to knock it a little bit because it was a little bit commercial and it follows Moon Madness. But I think in its own right, I think this is a killer album.
Uneven song. Mm-hmm.
Uneven song. I mean, yeah, like I said, even like the poppier pieces, it's just, man, this is a great album.
It really is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
This is my number 5.
pleasing to the ears, and that's
It
the
is.
important thing. I think you could say that about almost every Camel album, even some of the really popular ones.
Mhm.
So that's my number 5.
Cool, good choice.
Yep.
Okay.
So my graduation year is 1984, so I'm a couple years younger than Ken. But 84 is interesting because in 84, not a ton of prog releases coming out. He's had some of the holdovers from the 70s were still putting out, a few of them were putting out decent albums, but prog metal is starting to kind of form right around that time. So I would say out of my 5 choices, 3 of them I was listening to at the time. The other 2 I got into a little bit later on. My first choice is 3 of a Perfect Pair from King Crimson. So this is the 3rd album in that first little trilogy there of the lineup with Ballou and Fripp and Bruford and Tony Levin. And this is back when these 3 albums came out, I love Discipline. Beat is pretty good, and I think this is also pretty good. There's moments of greatness on here. There's a couple tracks I don't really care for as much, but still, it's King Crimson. It's this lineup. The title track is amazing. Sleepless is great. Lark's Tongues and Aspic, what is that? Part 3 is great. No Warning is great. There's enough really, really cool things on here. And of course, musically, it's just out of this world, just like this lineup always was. Tony Levin is spectacular on this album. Love the interplay
Bruford,
between the guitars. Bruford is amazing. You got those great vocals. It's just a really cool, kind of quirky, crimson-y, new wavy weirdness. I don't know. I've always kind of dug it. Again, it's not my favorite King Crimson album, but it's King Crimson. It's pretty notable, and I had to put it in my top 5. So
I think it's their most underrated album.
It's a good album.
I think it's a great album. I like it.
Well, you know what it is. Unfortunately, they released Discipline first, and I think the other 2 that followed had a hard time following that. Because that's truly greatness right there.
Yeah.
While the Beat and this one have moments of that, I don't think they're quite as strong through and through like that album is. But still, it's pretty exceptional stuff when you think about it.
Did you see them, Pete? Did you see them in 84?
No, I didn't see them till like 90 or 91.
That tour was a great tour. I mean, that was a bit more of an experimental album, in a way.
Yeah.
More dissonant and.
One dance track with Sleepless,
Sleepless. Yeah, is Sleepless on that one, or is it?
Yeah,
right.
It's on this album.
Yeah, I remember live when they were playing. They were all playing percussion live. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, cool. All right, back to 88.
All right, back to 88. All right, now this is an album that I discovered right in about the time, like literally, I discovered this late 88. Not particularly progressive, but it is a great live album. I mean, great album. Iron Maiden, Seven Sons of the Seventh Son. Not really progressive, but it has its moments. Keyboards and synthesizers. This is an album that I wish I would have saw them live perform. But the title track, Prophecy and the Clairvoyant, just a great album. Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. That's my number 2 there.
Good choice. Really good album. Underrated album, I think.
It really is.
Yeah. All right, King Diamond, otherwise known as George Lamie. What do you got?
My number 4 is Uzeb and Didier Lockwood.
Love it.
Absolutely live. This is the only one on my list I was not listening to back then. I found them only years later when I found the bass player's solo albums, and then liked them so much I backtracked and got all the Uzeb stuff. But one time only collaboration with Lockwood. He writes 3 out of the 5 songs. The other 2 are the guitar player wrote them, Michel Cuisson. Great tracks. It's a good live recording. 4 of the 5 songs are pretty thumping, and then you got 1 ballad. But it's just a high energy performance. Kind of short, like 30 something, high 30s in minutes, but it's a good one.
I saw Uzeb.
Oh, you did? On your honeymoon?
I mean, I guess I have stories for everything. I'm sorry, but we were on vacation. I drove from Toronto to Montreal. I was exhausted. It's the most boring drive. It's just like it's just flat lands, and all you see is Tim Hortons donut shops, And we checked into the hotel, and I see that UZEB is playing that night. And they were playing some theater because the jazz festival was going on, Montreal Jazz Festival. And they were playing indoors. And if I remember, George, weren't they a quartet at one point?
Yeah, the early stuff.
When I saw them, they were a trio. And I just took the wife, bought tickets, sitting somewhere up in the balcony. And I don't know, they played like a long set, and they took an intermission, and I think I fell asleep. I don't think I made it to the end. They were type A. Michel Cousin, he was fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but that's a great album. I mean, you put Didier Lockwood in any setting, and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of firepower on that album.
He's very badass.
Yeah, he was. So anyway.
Well, your wife was she was a saint, man, taking her to Hawkins.
Lauren is a trooper. She is a trooper.
You seem to take it in turns to fall asleep at gigs, though.
Here's a great one. If she watches this, she's gonna kill me. So Percy Jones playing the Knitting Factory, and it's solo bass, and we're sitting in the front row of the Knitting Factory, and literally, like, I have my feet up on the stage, and she's about 6 feet in front of Percy, and she passed right out right in front of him. So,
Wow.
You just imagine Percy's up there like,
I'll never let it. I can't let her watch this. She can't watch this. But she fell asleep, and I'm like, give her the elbow, It's like, come on, And Percy's wailing away on the fretless, He's got his pedals, and oh man, that was great. I made it up to Percy. I made him lunch one day. So
there you go. All right, where were we, Stephen?
Yeah. Well, where there is a Marillion, there has to be a fish, doesn't there?
There you go.
I listened to this an awful lot as well back then. This is Internal Exile. This is also Fish's second album away from Marillion. Casually across the UK, other than in Scotland, committing commercial suicide by making a remarkably Scottish-themed cover, wearing a beautiful Scottish garb on the cover, singing about being in internal exile and having everybody else kind of go. So this is not my favourite Fish album by some distance, but it does have some of his best moments on it. Shadow Play is fantastic.
Love it.
Lido, live, that's outstandingly good. Internal Exile does stand up. There is also a rather bizarre cover of Something in the Air, which we'll not talk too much about. Just Good Friends, that's a beautiful duet. It's an album I go back to from time to time. It's not one that really stands out in the catalogue for me personally. I do like it. I don't love it. But I loved it back then. I know this inside out, this album. So yeah, Internal Exile is my number 4.
I don't know if that cover is any worse than the US cover of that, where he's sitting in the shadows with the long coat kind of behind a tree or whatever, which I never thought was any good either. But
yeah, but I mean, they put that cover out because this one made no sense to anybody. Do you know? I mean, they went and put a bad cover on an album because it already had a bad cover.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got beautiful illustrations around here. Mark Wilkinson's doing his stuff. Do you know, he's doing his thing. But then you shove it all to the edges and make sure nobody can see it or make any sense of it.
Yeah.
There's a clear message happening here. Probably the wrong one. As a proud Scotsman, I may add.
Right.
Let's not get a political debate, but I'm all for politics, but maybe not put it on the front of your album.
Yeah, that's true.
Or make it your lead single.
True. But a good album. I enjoy that one.
Yeah, I do like it.
All right, Ken, back to you.
Oh, me? It's my turn. Okay, so my 4th album is by Pulsar, French band, Halloween. Came out in 1977. Pulsar started out, their first album was called Pollen, very kind of spacey prog. The second album called Strands of the Future. Kind of went one step further, very kind of cosmic sounding, maybe a little bit like Clear Light Symphony, something like that, but it had this sort of just very ethereal quality to it, kind of floating. And then they came out with Halloween, and Halloween was a concept album. It's partially in English, partially in French, not a lot of vocals. And it's kind of like the musical love child of like Genesis and Goblin. It kind of came back down to earth a bit. A lot of acoustic guitar, a lot of mellotron on the album, flute, and then you got these spacey synthesizers. When the electric guitar comes in, it's kind of got like a Hackett quality to it. It's just an incredible record. I mean, I like their first three albums. They're all excellent, but that was a band that got better and better. I mean, I remember I picked up Strands of the Future at Corvettes. I don't know if any of you guys remember Corvettes. And it was, again, I'm dating myself, but hey,
I remember Corvettes.
1977, you know, and that's where I used to get a lot of my albums. And I remember picking up Strands of the Future when I saw the cover, and it was like, what the hell is this? I got to have this. And it just kind of spooked me out. And then this thing came along, and it's just like blew my head off. It's I mean, if you guys don't know this album, I mean, this is a must-own album. I mean, especially if you're like, I'm a Mellotron freak, and this is one of the great ones.
Yeah, I haven't heard it in a few years though. I need to pull that out and give it another listen. It's been a while. It is really good. It's really good.
Yeah, I must admit that I don't know that at all. So that's homework for me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would recommend it. Yeah, it's quite good.
Steve, write it down.
Yeah, I'll rewatch just that little segment.
Okay. All right.
All right, my next choice. This guy has, for a while there, he was kind of playing with everybody, and he came up and played with a very notable composer, musician, and that's kind of where he got his name. And then he started popping up in other bands, and then eventually he had a pretty famous solo career, which he still has to this day. But I remember the first time I heard anything from this album, this is his debut solo album. I was a pretty avid reader of Guitar Player magazine, and they used to have, in 83, 84, they used to have these little flexi discs, these little like kind of plastic little mini 45s in the magazine. And I remember seeing one day, and I'm like, looks kind of ridiculous, but I'll put it on. I never heard of the guy before. And I put it on my record player, and all of a sudden you're hearing this cool, dun 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 bum 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 Steve Vai Flexible. It was the Attitude song. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was like, holy shit, I don't think I've ever heard anybody play like that before. And then before you know it, you start to do a little research, and you realize he was with Frank Zappa. He was shortly to join Alcatraz and Steve Vai's, David Lee Roth's band, and then Whitesnake. So before you know it, he's all over the place. And then he releases his next solo album, and that does really big business. But this is the first one, and this is very Zappa-ish. There's a lot of really wacky stuff going on here, but I love it. If you like kind of late 70s, early 80s Zappa, that's kind of, he learned a lot from Frank. You got Little Green Men, which is wacky with all these little kind of weird voices and things like that. You got Viv Woman, which is really cool. You've got the Attitude song, Call It Sleep, and Junkie. For me, side 2 is the best of the original LP at the end of the CD. Some great guitar soloing. It's like this weird mix of kind of prog and experimental avant-garde comedy, weirdness, and shred guitar, like all rolled into one. And it's still to this day, so one thing about Steve Vai, I love him as a player. I think he's probably one of the most talented guitar players we've ever had. But I've always found that a lot of his solo albums are really uneven, and some I don't even really enjoy because his compositions are so just bizarre. And it's like I would love one day to take like all of his albums and pull out like the best from each one. That probably makes one of the best instrumental guitar albums ever. But all of them individually, I think, are just really they're really spotty for me. But he's still an amazing player. But I don't think he's ever gotten as kind of proggy or kind of just avant-garde since this one. It's almost like he started off, all right, here's kind of what I learned from Frank. I'm going to kind of do my own thing with that. And then I'm going to go and move into more straightforward, like guitar-y, shreddy type stuff, which is what he did. And but Flexible, really, really cool. Still like this a lot. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, wow, most of this is not like the Attitude song. That's the reason why I bought this. But over time, I've grown to really appreciate a lot of the other stuff that's on here. It's actually a pretty cool, unique album.
I saw him play at my father's place in Roslyn when Flexible came out. His parents were in the back of the club selling the album.
No doubt.
And it was supposed to be a clinic sponsored by one of the guitar shops out on Long Island. I can't remember the name, a long time ago. And it was Randy Coven on bass and Todd Turkisher on drums. And I mean, it was incredible. We recorded the show, and when it was so successful, they did another one a few months later, went back on a line, and then we bumped into a friend of Steve Vai's who was standing in front of it, and we were schmoozing with him. So we had our tape deck with us. So he set up a board patch for us and a mic and mic. So we did a mic line mix, and I have somewhere in the house, I have a master of that. And I also we got from him also demos, Vai demos, stuff that never got released. I don't think ever got released.
Wow.
But it's one thing to see Steve. I've seen him, saw him with Zappa. I've seen him, I saw him with David Lee Roth. But man, to see him in a room with like 300 people, that was something.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Nice.
I saw him, I think, at exactly the wrong time, because I saw him open for Aerosmith with the band Vai.
Yeah.
So that was Devin Townsend on vocals, who I have links with Wild Hearts and various things. So I thought the two of them together would be fantastic. But it was in a shed, and the sound was horrific. I mean, it was so loud that even when Aerosmith came out, they were 3 songs in before anyone could work out what songs they were playing, because the sound was so bad. So if you can imagine Steve Vai playing stuff off the Vai album with Devin Townsend going mad, the volume was at about 152. And they lift that and put it into an oil drum, and that's what you got. I mean, it was a night of and it was
I mean, I like the Sex and Religion album, but
it's the only time I've seen him.
It's not really what he should have been playing. I like that album, but that's Steve was getting involved in all these things at the time that really was not what he wanted to do. But like Whitesnake, that's not the band he should have been in. I think the Raw thing was really good while it lasted. Alcatraz, that was kind of an experiment, not really a good fit for him. The Sex and Religion album with Devin Townsend, it's a really good album, but that's not really Steve Vai. Whether you like it or not, his solo stuff is what he wants to do. Really weird orchestral shit. That's like, that's a lot of all these strange ideas and a lot of, soloing and textures and stuff. And, I have a hard time with some of it. I like some of it a lot. Some of it I just don't care for much.
He doesn't want to be the sideman.
Yeah. And he just wants to record whatever comes into his head. And it's just, and
some of that stuff should just stay on demos.
Yeah, I mean, you can appreciate someone wanting to just put out what they want to put out, and whether people buy it or not be damned, right? Mm-hmm. But it's hard, I guess, for folks, like me, who I'm a fan. I love his playing. I think he's a genius. But some of his albums, man, they're not easy listens. They're just, unfortunately. So anyway, that's my number 4 pick from 1984. Back to Chuck.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Well, mine is probably one of the, it's a very influential album. It's one of these albums that, you either get it or you don't get it. And this band, by this time and so, they went from being like the synth pop band in the early 80s, supporting Peter Gabriel and Genesis, to this, Spirit of Eden, Talk Talk.
Oh, man.
Now this here, so that this album is just on another level of brilliance right here. So that of the 3 albums that they did, including Mark Hollis's solo album, my favorite is Laughingstock, but this album, so that is still just an amazing album. I bought this the day that it came out. That's how I remember they were promoting it very much at Tower Records. And I remember them talking about this album and promoting it, saying that this was going to be a great album. And I wound up purchasing this album, and I tell you, which I had it on cassette tape for a number of years. until I finally got it on CD. But this album right here, Talk Talk's Spirit of Eden, 1988, man, brilliant album.
I concur.
I've never heard it.
That album's a masterpiece.
Oh, it's
just
unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Oh, you gotta have you like it's just a must-own album. That's just.
I think you'd like it, Peter, as well.
I mean, I've heard of them, obviously, but I just never listened to it.
Well,
Okay, everybody thinks of that like their real pop stuff, the early stuff. This is something totally different. I mean, it's like the beginning of like post-rock, and just very ethereal. Just man, it's all about space and you know what's going on between the notes. You know, it's a brilliant album.
Yeah, it's a great pick.
Check it out.
One of the best albums of the 80s.
I agree.
Yep.
Pete, buy it.
I will check it out. Absolutely.
And number 3,
Yes.
Chick Electric Band debut.
Yes.
Well, Pete and I have talked about this on the channel a few times. A lot of people have a problem, myself included to some degree, with the production. I wish there was some grit to it, but it is what it is. This is what the label was.
Songs, baby. It's all about the songs.
And the songs, a good half of this is brilliant. And then I think amongst the other songs is some good stuff. I mean, Silver Temple, Gotta Match, Rumble, King Cockroach.
King Cockroach.
It's incredible stuff. I mean, and for me, it started me. I was only playing drums for about a year at the time. I heard Dave Weckl. I've heard a bunch of fusion guys before. I couldn't do it, but I knew what it was at least. Dave Weckl, he's not playing that single stroke style, a lot of double stroke stuff, and just the way he turned my head around drumming.
Well, he's an amazing drummer.
That plays a big part in it that I just I couldn't get past not putting this one on there.
Yeah.
When you bought it, did some of the money go to the Church of Scientology?
I hope not.
Wow. Wow.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to go there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that album for me, it's not as adventurous as some of the later albums from the band, but I think it's got some of the best songwriting.
I'd say the same thing. I concur.
Right? I mean, it's just so catchy, and the melodies are immediate, and you know, the playing is great too. But I think that album for me, and the one that came after it, Light Years, are more kind of tuneful albums. Whereas as you get further in the catalog, it's just really complex and adventurous playing, and maybe not quite as catchy. But that's the brilliance of the Electric Band catalog, is you get a little bit of everything on all those albums. We miss you, Chick. We miss you.
Yeah, most definitely, man.
All right, back to 91, right?
91, yes. So 91 was all about, as I said, the Seattle scene. So it's only right that I choose a Seattle band. And here we have Operation Live Crime. Okay, so we're showing our age now here because it did come with a fancy fangled new thing called a CD in it. But it did also come with this fantastic piece of technology, a VHS, so you could actually watch Queensryche in your own home. Who'd have thought it? But yeah, I mean, to me, is this the definitive Mind Crime? I think it probably is. I absolutely love this album. It's just outstandingly good.
And you have it live.
And I have it live. Yes, absolutely. It's live. It's also got a really fancy booklet. You know,
nice.
This is just so when you're 18 and you're picking up all this, just fantastic. And as I say, and then going and annoying your parents with it in the living room because that's the only place that the VHS was. So everybody was going to be listening to Queensryche, and they all loved it. You really didn't.
Did they have a choice? Did they have a choice?
Did. Yeah, he had Rage for Order. That's how I got into Queensryche. So he understood, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we have to watch this too." Yeah, absolutely. Let's put this on. But yeah, I've got different versions of it and various things, and I have no idea the last time that the VHS was actually played. But I am delighted to see that I did rewind it back to the start. See, I cared about the next time that I was going to watch this, even though I obviously didn't.
right, show of hands. Who's the VHS player?
No, not anymore.
No.
Not anymore.
I still have a few cassettes, but I don't have a player, so they're loved, but just not watched anymore. But yeah,
there's a
Hold
fee
on,
if
you probably make some money on those at some point.
there's a fee if you don't rewind that tape. There's a fee. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have to.
Does anybody remember what that fee was? What did they used to charge us if you didn't rewind the tape?
Oh man, $5, man. No, $3.
$3?
something like that.
$3.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I could see 50 cents or something. $3.
$3.
Wow.
Man.
You know they had that rewind machine sitting right there, right? So it's
Exactly.
crazy.
A great moneymaker, though, isn't it?
Yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
I used to hate going into Blockbuster.
Oh man.
I used to like going to like the little, the mom and pop shops.
Those were better. Yes.
Yeah.
They were better, and they had much better porno in the back room.
They had better porno, they had better horror selection because I know
Yeah,
the
exactly.
movies by
The
me
hor-
had the best horror
Mhm.
movies ever.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's a good choice. That's a great live album.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite live albums. Still play it a lot now. So yeah, and to me, it might well be, along with Rage for Order, it's definitive Queensryche for me.
Yeah. Cool. All right, back to 1977.
All right. So just to reiterate, all these albums I'm mentioning, to me, they're almost interchangeable. I mean, we're ranking them, but for me, the ranking doesn't really mean much. So my number 3 album, right? Number 3, Grobschnitt, Rock Pommel's
nice.
Land. So Grobschnitt started out, they were kind of nicknamed the German Grateful Dead because they used to play like these marathon concerts, and they used to open up with like a comedy troupe. It was all a lot of theatrical element infused in their stage shows. And they started out sort of much more like a psych band. And then they gradually incorporated a symphonic rock sound. A lot of synthesizer, a lot of Mellotron, a lot of Yes, a lot of Genesis influences. And there was always this kind of quirky humor. Really, their best album was the next album, Solar Music Live, which is de facto the greatest live album ever recorded. I mean, that's indisputable, right, Pete? Nobody would say, there's never been a better live album than Solar Music Live. But this is really a great one. It's this really idiotic story about this kid named Ernie, and he finds like this flying serpent, and they rides off to some mystical dream world called like, it's meaningless, but the music itself is just pure, intense symphonic prog rock, and one of my favorites.
It's the only studio album of them I've ever owned.
Oh.
Well, the early albums are great. Ballermann is a great one. That one has the studio version of Solar Music, which they blew up in 78. And if you've never, by the way, you should go on YouTube if you own the box set that has the video from Rock Palace of them performing Solar Music Live. You have to see this thing. I mean, but yeah, the early albums in their own right, they're fantastic. But then they just got a little more symphonic. They just got that Yes Genesis thing going on. And Jumbo was a very, very good album. I think that was the one that preceded it. One of my bucket list bands. There are 2 bands that I'm going to talk about tonight are on my bucket list. I never got to see, and Grobschnitt's one of them.
I like that album. I really love Solar Music. Solar Music is a fantastic album. So, which I agree.
It's the total package. It's the greatest live album ever.
I love it.
Cool. All right. My next choice, number 3, I was not listening to in 1984. I didn't get into these guys till probably about 6 years later, after their singer had already left. Just as I was getting into the band, I'm like, oh, these guys are great. Oh yeah, but that singer, he's not with them anymore. I'm like, no. And it's Fugazi by
Fugazi.
Their second album. I mean, I fell. The first album I ever heard by them was Clutching at Straws, which, still to this day remains my favorite. And then of course Fish left the band shortly thereafter, and I started getting into everything else. And then, well, wait, he's gone. Yes, he's gone. So, but yeah, this is just cool stuff. I mean, what was really interesting about Marillion, and I guess also IQ and 12th Night and Palace and what have you, they were
Pendragon.
Yeah, Pendragon a little bit later on, is that they were trying to recapture the kind of the British symphonic rock thing, which was so popular in the 70s. And, these early Marillion albums are very Peter Gabriel era Genesis flavored, which I love. And Fish sounds a little bit like Gabriel. He's got his own personality, though. He's got the angry, very personal lyrics, and the music is pretty aggressive. A lot of cool keyboards, some really good guitar work from Rothery. Just great songs on here. I mean, Assassin is one of their classic older tracks. Punch and Judy's lots of fun. She Chameleon.
Incubus.
Yeah, great stuff. The title track is amazing. Emerald Lies. I mean, it's like, for me, this is, I think out of the 4 Fish albums, most people that I talk to generally put this at the bottom of the 4. I think it's their darkest album out of the 4 of them, maybe the first album, I don't know, but I think there's such brilliance on all 4 of the albums that it's really hard to rank them for me. But I on its own, I love it. If they didn't put out any other albums, I would be heralding this as a classic that I think it is, and that is my number 3.
Let's not forget about the drumming.
That guy.
What's it?
He's pretty good, right?
We just got in there's that new 4-disc version of it.
Of this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
excellent.
I've been lucky enough to have it for a little while, and the remix is quite special too.
Really?
It's interesting. Yeah, it's probably the one that benefits most from the remix and remaster that it's had. It's interesting because you can definitely pick
one of
out
those
things.
boxes.
You want to see it?
Yep.
You want to see it?
Sure.
It's through there. I can go and get it for you if you want to see it, Peter.
You probably got it right there.
Let's see. Yeah.
I know I shouldn't have asked to see this because you know what will happen after I see it.
Another great one with another great documentary. Although Fish is a little bit more coy because he's got a book on the way, so the band have already alluded to he won't quite tell his stories anymore for the documentaries. So yeah, here we go. This is it.
Nice.
That looks nice.
So it's you got the album, you got a show from the Spectrum in Montreal. That's 2 discs, and then you get a Blu-ray, which the high res version and all kinds of bonus stuff. Ton of bonus stuff on here.
Yeah, there's a clock show
Yeah.
from Switzerland on there, which is just filmed on a couple of cameras. Man, that's a fantastically sweaty experience. Fish is in full flow. The interview that comes out before the show is utter cringe, but the show itself is absolutely fantastic.
Can I give my one gripe about Marillion? It might get me banned from future shows.
Uh-oh.
So I love the Fish era, but one thing about the band, I wish that he was a little bit less wordy and there was a little bit more space for the band to play, a little more solos. Just sometimes, they were kind of, they were obviously very influenced by Genesis.
Don't forget Peter Hamill. He has that wordiness from Peter Hamill.
Yeah, sometimes it's almost like Fish was trying to fill up the space when I just kind of wanted the space to just be about the space. I wanted to hear a little more Rothery, a little more Kelly. Don't get me wrong, I'm a Fugazi fan. I love those first 4 albums of Fish era for me. Those were superb albums.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just kind of want to hear them stretch out a little bit more. And for Fish, he could play the tambourine, he can, he can pick up the flute,
The interesting thing for me, I think the first one of the deluxe box sets that came out was Misplaced Childhood for obvious reasons. And that's the only one where that 5 got back together behind a recording desk and sat and listened to what they did and faded things in, like the classic album shows that you get. Mm-hmm. And the 5 of them are there, and Ian Mosley is quiet and reserved because he's quiet and reserved. But every time Fish starts to talk, everybody else just goes. You see that dynamic between the 5 of them, and you understand how things went the way they went. Even now, put them back in a room, and he's the dominant factor. Now, I love the wordiness. I love the poetry, if you want to get a bit up yourself about it. I think that it's part of the experience of Marillion at that stage. And it did get ironed out as they went along. However, you can see why he's such a dominant force, because he's just a dominant guy.
Big, tall guy, too.
Yeah. I love the story from Ian Mosley. I'm giving up, sorry, far too much Marillion chat here. But there is the talk in the Fugazi documentary about, obviously, Mosley's just come into the band, and Fish is ruling with a rod of iron, because that's what he does. And there's a bit of a standoff between the two of them. And it comes to, you know, if you say that again, I'll hit you, kind of thing. And he says it again, and Mosley hits him. Two of them got on very well after that.
And none of that surprises me.
No,
exactly.
Too funny.
All right.
Back to Chuck.
All right, back to 88. Well, Steven opened the door for it, and I'm just gonna go right through with it. Operation Mindcrime. Bought this a few weeks after it came out. You know, we couldn't go anywhere without seeing or hearing Silent Lucidity. But that's just the beginning of how great this album is from beginning to end. You know, this listening to this album still sends chills down my spine. You know, what's it? I don't think that they've ever topped this album. You know, it was the band at their peak. Just an amazing album. Which you heard their influences briefly on Rage and Order, but you heard a lot of their progressive influences on here. Just an amazing story, and even live, it's just even better. I didn't see them for this tour, you know, but I wanted to see them and just couldn't muster up the money to get the tickets to see them. But Operation Mindcrime, Queensryche is my number 3.
You know what's great about that? It's such a deep concept album that it is. You can still grab off plenty of songs that stand really well on their own out of that.
Yep.
The joining parts are fantastic, all the little spoken words and the ambient noise, but it's an album about the songs.
Yeah. Yep.
I saw them on that tour. They opened for Metallica, was on Justice tour, and they opened those shows. I saw that.
Wow.
So good.
The first time I saw them was on the Promised Land tour, and by that time Jeff was wearing a loincloth and hitting an anvil on stage.
Wow. Wow.
No idea what that was all about. Not a clue.
Glad I missed that.
Forgive me, that was my number 4, or my number 2, actually.
Cool. All right. My number 2, some of my favorite cover art.
Johannes.
Yep. Yes.
Fates Warning, Awaken the Guardian.
Love it.
Unfortunately, the Swan Song for John Arch, one of my favorite singers. Pretty much a companion piece to the previous one, Spectre Within. Most people like it a tad more. I have them about even, I would say. Even the Softy song is really great on here. Guardian, that's just one of the great ballads. The chorus melody is incredible. John Arch is just a magician with the melodies. Not a bad song on this, so I would highly recommend this one.
Yeah, it's still to this day one of my favorite Fates Warning albums. Just
same here.
Genius. Yeah.
Yep.
Good choice.
So I like the John Arch albums that the albums that John Arch is doing now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah. Well, he's one of those guys, you know, when he left Fates Warning, he didn't really do anything for many, many years. So his voice is in great shape now. Yeah, there's no road weirdness on that at all.
Those Arch Matthias albums, man, they're excellent.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Stephen, back to 91.
Back to 91. Yeah, and at the risk of laboring the point, 91, I mean, it was tumbleweed musically, 91. You know, it was for me anyway.
88.
All my friends were jumping on the Seattle bandwagon, and I will out myself here. I did try. I've seen Pearl Jam, and I bought some Soundgarden albums and various things. I like some more than I like others. And I look back on it now and realise that, I mean, I came out of hard rock and metal, which was disappearing up its own arse at the same time as well. Didn't quite know where to turn or what to do. So when I walked into my local record shop a place called Gold Rush, which I still lament the decline of, and heard music that made me go, I have to go and ask what that is right now and buy it right now. And it was the Osric Tentacles. What it was. And the album was Strangetude. Now, my record shop, my local record shop, was called Gold Rush. And that'll tell you the sort of music that you normally heard in there, because it's named after the Neil Young album. Nothing wrong with Neil Young. So, you know, but that was what you heard when you went in. So when this was playing, it really was like, what on earth is that? Do you know? And I just had to have it. I bought it. I think I walked in, heard 2 songs, bought it and walked out again. Do you know, never browsed, never looked, never. That was the money I had in my pocket. This was where it was going. So Strangetude is an amazing mix of different things. Do you know, you've got early Porcupine Tree sounding things on here with Sploosh. You've got a bit of Hawkwind with Weirditude. Actually, White Rhino, the opener, sounds a bit like Rush. There's loads of things going on here. It's instrumental. I mean, they're crusties, as we would call them over here, hippies, they're whatever you want to call them. And you hear them introduce a song at one point on the album, and they're all a bit posh and various things. It's that kind of scene. But man, oh man, this is such a strong album. And I was listening to it today, and it still stacks up. Still one of my favourites by them. And the musicianship is stellar. And Merv Pepler is the drummer. And some of his work on this is fantastic. The hi-hat work that's on the go, it's just phenomenal. And the only downside is that I've seen them live once, and it goes down as one of the worst gigs I've ever attended. We just didn't understand, as guys who had just left school, just exactly what we were going to attend. So we went to the Tunnel in Glasgow, and we arrived at the time you go to a concert. You go to a concert, 8 o'clock at night? Expect the support band to come on about 9:30, 9:15. No. Censor, who were a kind of metal rap crossover, who actually were fantastic, I have to say. They came on about midnight. We were the only people who were doing things like driving home afterwards. Everybody else was on a different plane entirely. The room was tiny. It had, and I kid you not, it had a stream in it. We were downstairs in a place called the Tunnel, and you actually had to walk over a bridge to get from the bar into where the band would play.
Wow.
By the time that they were playing dance music and rave as it would have been back then, it was, mind-bendingly bad. You know? That everybody else's mind was already bent. That was the thing. We were just in the wrong state of mind to understand what was meant to be happening. So by the time that we had really got and thought, okay, the band are coming on, we couldn't get over the bridge. The room was rammed. So we watched this much of the Osric Tentacles, and they might have been good or they might not, but we'd had enough. We did stay, but we were definitely the first guys out.
I saw their first show in the US at Wetlands in Tribeca, in downtown Manhattan. And I mean, they were unbelievable. Strangetude is one of their best albums, and that show was, I mean, it was a mind fuck. And I mean, it was great because they did like 2 sets, and we were all like transfixed, and of course we were all pretty high. But then the second set, there was a bit of a delay for the second set. They were all backstage. They were sitting there smoking a spliff, and then this, finally they opened the door, and this cloud just came out from the back, and they were nice guys too, very nice guys, and very mellow. And I saw them a number of times. And they're great.
That set they played at Nearfest was really, really good. That's the only time I saw them.
Yeah, seen them in a club. Yeah, they were coming around for a while, and they were getting a lot of support, a lot of record label support, and they were a good live band.
To me, it seems like they peaked with Jurassic Shift, and it just seems like from that point onward, everything just started to sound samey. Which you listen to it, and it's like, wait a minute, you're listening to the same song that they played on an album 5 years ago.
Well, that's the joke that's always been that surrounded them, Chuck, is that they got a million albums, and most of them sound the same, but they're all great, right? I mean, you've never heard Jurassic Shift or Strangetude, and you grab one of the later ones, and you haven't heard anything else. It's fantastic. I'm like the one that came
I've
before.
got the
That
box
came
set.
before that.
Thing that looks like
You know why I think that? You know why? Because I think the lineup kept changing, and Ed Wynn, he was like the one constant. So, and he wasn't exactly getting input from other people. So my favorite's Erpland, but Strangetude.
Oh, that's good too. Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to say, I've got the box set it looks like a box of spaced out Rice Krispies. Do you know?
I had that too. If you want me to run out and get it.
I've got it through there too. I think it's 4 or 5 albums.
What if you notice? I have a lot of.
They were early cassettes. I bought it because it looked cool and I was into them at the time and took it home. Man, oh man, that's fantastic. It's so good. So you think all these cassettes that were released within minutes of each other. Yeah, there'll be a couple of good moments on it. Oh, wow.
There were so many British sort of psych bands, jam bands, festival bands. They used to have all kinds of names for them. Remember there was a great band called Cherokee Mist. You had Osric Tentacles. Then Richard Allen had his Delirium label, and he was putting out so many of these bands.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, they were basically ripping off the Osrics. Some better than others.
Well, a similar band, the Jam Correct. That's another band that I love very much. But they're a little bit more power driven, and so rather than the psych gong hawkwind feel of Osric Tentacles.
Yep.
Yeah,
a good band.
Yeah,
they are.
Cool. All right, back to 77.
Oh, it's me. Okay, so my number 2, another bucket list band for me. And I came close on this one. Wasn't my fault, but I had something. I was involved in trying to get him over here. Eloy.
Oh man.
Ocean. So I've been a huge fan of Eloy, kind of forever. And for me, it was I got to work with the band for the Visionary album. I got to release it for North America, and I was I was involved in getting the band to play at Nearfest, and then of course Frank got in an accident and they had to cancel. So this was 1977. The band kind of started out very basic, more in the hard rock prog style, very heavy organ. Manfred White-Zorka was the keyboard player. We kind of stuck to the basics, but great. They're like Inside and Floating. Those are fantastic albums.
Oh yeah.
And then they had Dawn and Power and the Passion, which they added like this orchestral element. For Ocean was a concept album based around Greek mythology and the lost continent of Atlantis. The lineup was a little different. Detlef Schmidtchen was the keyboard player. I'm killing his name. Sorry, Detlef. And he incorporated a lot of synthesizer and a lot of mellotron. They had Jürgen Rosenthal on drums, and he was a monster drummer. And the band is always compared to Pink Floyd, I think. And there's some element of that because Frank Borneman's guitar sound, I think, it owes a little bit to David Gilmour. And there is a little more of that spacey, sort of wish you were here element to it. Yeah. But for the studio work, my favorite Eloy album is Silent Cries and Mighty Echoes.
Too.
Ocean is just a hair below it. It's one of their great albums. And the live album, the double live album, which was from the Ocean tour, the live versions of the Ocean material, I mean, took it even to the next level. So, that's my number 2. They're one of my favorite bands. Yeah,
great band.
2 great German bands.
Yeah. It's a great band. I mean, Frank has that accent that some people
don't like. Yeah,
they don't like. I like the music so much, I get past it, and it has a little bit of a charm to it, after a while.
And one of the great album covers of all time.
Yeah, it is. Actually, they had like a stretch of great album covers.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can. Well, I don't know if we can see it, but let's see.
There it goes. Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to see, but it is a great, and it has one of the all-time great song titles, Atlantis' Agony at June 5th, 8498, 13 p.m. Gregorian Earth Time. that was pure Frank Borneman. That was And you know that he's threatening to come out with a new album.
Mhm.
The last album was actually I thought a pretty good Eloy album.
Shame that they've
It
never.
was
played
really
him.
good. I didn't like the vocals on it much.
No, for me, he only had one real miss, Metromania.
That's his like heavy metal album. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of like a flaming turd. But but really, other than that, I think let's say his batting average is very high for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd say the really early Eloy albums, like the first 4, are really underrated. Really good, like Deep Purple inspired heavy rock.
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. More of that hard rock. Man, listen to Future City, man. That Inside and Floating albums.
Really good.
Those albums are just fantastic.
Yeah. Very cool. Great choice.
Thank you.
All right, so this album, I will admit, in 1984, I did not buy this. I bought this a couple of years afterwards because I think by this point in time, I was getting a little disillusioned with the kind of the style that this band was going into, and I was getting into much heavier stuff in 1984. So, Grace Under Pressure, I was like,
Nice.
I will pass on that. I bought it a couple of years later just because I felt I had to get it, and I got it at a good price. But I was going through like I'm not really happy with Rush period throughout part of the 80s after Signals. But I have grown to really, really love this album a lot. In fact, I listened to it today at the gym and I was like, yeah, this is
Top
quite
10.
good. It holds up really well. I like Alex Lifeson's guitar tones on here, the kind of the single coil clean stuff with the chorus pedal going on. Really good songs. I think Getty sounds really good. Neil sounds great as always. Distant Early Warning and After Image are classic Rush tracks. Red Sector A is amazing. Between the Wheels, the Body Electrics, I mean, the top to bottom, it's really, really good. Is it big, heavy 70s Rush? No. But
No.
to me, I'll listen to this any day over Hold Your Fire, which is probably one of my least favorite Rush albums. And I like this a lot. I think this was the successor to Signals. Yeah, I kind of put the two of them together in a way, but I think it's held up really, really well, and I like it more and more as the years go on.
Nice. Mhm.
Which is the album where they turned into the Police?
The album before it, Signals.
Signals. Yeah, they lost. Permanent Waves was after that. They lost.
Even Moving Pictures you don't like, huh?
Oh no, Moving Pictures. No. Oh, I don't know the chronology. Moving Pictures came after Permanent Waves.
Pictures, then Signals, then this, then Power.
Well,
Windows.
Moving
Power
Pictures,
Windows and Hold Your Fire is really where that Police thing really started to come full.
No,
Mhm.
yeah, Moving Pictures is fantastic. That's a great record.
Yeah.
I acknowledge it.
All right, Chuck, you're number one.
All right, my number one is probably going to make a few people happy and probably going to piss off a few others. It's the debut studio album of the band Cardiacs. Once again, A Little Man and a House. What's that? And The Whole World Window. One of these bands I know that you're not going to get too much into, and so kind of like Wire meets Gentle Giant at times. What's a bit of Genesis meets The Clash. What's that? One of these bands that's not real. This is now a band that I didn't discover till like about nearly 15 years later, but it's always going to be one of my favorite albums. They're not for everyone, but this is the album right over here. Little Man in a House from Cardiacs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've come up a couple times in recent shows now, right? Apparently we have a lot of fans out there.
Well, I make a lot of people happy by mentioning them.
I love them. Apparently,
yeah. They're one of those bands that I got into through the bands that I liked that name checked them.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of kind of
Fish.
heavier, Fish,
Fish,
Wild
love them.
Hearts. I mean, musically, bands that are miles apart. We talk about how powerful the music of the Cardiacs was. And it took me quite a while to kind of understand what they were talking about, because man, oh man, it's standoffish music.
It really is.
It does not welcome you in. I mean, it's
Oh.
desperately trying to keep you out here. You're not allowed in. You are not getting in. But once you batter your way through it, oh man, once you connect, it's phenomenal. So yeah, serious band.
what Magma is to Pete, cardiac is for me.
Wow. Okay.
I tried and I zoomed right over my head. I just tried and I tried.
I mean, I must admit that on my first few encounters, because you know what it's like when you're that kind of age, someone that you admire in a band tells you that that's who you should be listening to. You rush out and buy a couple of albums. I took them home and just was like,
no, they're not for
what
everyone.
on earth have I just spent my money on? And it took me years to kind of think, oh, right, okay, I kind of get it now. And now I really get it. So long journey.
Yeah, I never got that with Magma. I tried. But every one of those damn albums, I'm like, man, this sucks just like the last one.
Pete, you know, it's going to come up like every episode.
I know. Well, it's,
you know?
what can you do? It's like the running joke, right? You know, that's all right. George.
All right.
86.
When Anthony first mentioned this topic, the first thing I thought was that 86 was not a very deep year for prog related music. But after that, it was that the whole idea of tying it to something like graduation is to tie it to events in your life, you know, who you were hanging out with, what you guys listened to the most. So for me, Tony McAlpine, Edge of Infinity.
Nice.
When this came out, you couldn't get it off the turntable. I mean, all of us, every party, every hangout after school, we were just totally taken with this. You got Billy Sheehan and Steve Smith as a rhythm section.
I can't beat that, man.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. There was other Shrapnel stuff before this, but this kind of crystallized the whole thing going forward. Is basically shot the genre for like 15 years. I followed this genre pretty closely, and really nobody really made a better record than this for that kind of stuff. I mean, it's very consistent song-wise. The Stranger, The Witch and the Priest, The Taker, just a strong record all the way across. And this is funny you mentioned the Plexi disc thing. The first time that we heard anything was a Plexi disc of one of these songs. I don't remember which one it was, but yeah, we heard that, and then somebody got the record, and we were all just like, man, this is good. And he's made a couple records since then that are close to this, but no,
that's a pretty good, damn good album right there.
Yeah, this is my favorite.
I think
it's still a situation to the Vinnie Moore. I mean, they're both so good, and it's really a testament to each album that, you know, hard rock and metal fans at the time were so. I mean, you mentioned putting that on a party and everybody getting into it. I mean, you could never put on an instrumental album at any kind of party and have, you know, a bunch of 8-year-olds paying attention, right? I mean, that's something right there, right?
We were just blown away that he played guitar and keyboards at the same level, virtuoso level. Where it's, as good as my last cover art was, this one's that bad. That's terrible.
That's awful, man.
And there's a Euro version with female feet. It's even worse.
It's feet, for crying out loud. What difference does it make, right? It's going to be bad.
Oh, man. I had that on vinyl, and I remember went to listening to it one time. Friends come on in like, what the fuck is this, man? I said, what is this shit, man?
Didn't he have the picture on the back of him, like playing
the
white Charvel or something?
Yep.
There you go. He's all clean shaven with the big hair.
Yeah.
He's playing the game.
But, you know, I mean, he mega chops on that album, but still very musical, right?
But the compositions is what makes it. It's a very good album, and it helps that he has a great lineup with him, guys playing with him. It's a great album. I love the album.
Yeah, I mean, there was like there were all these kind of shredders at the time, and there were a couple that really stood out above the others. You know, him and Vinnie, obviously. You know, Yngwie at the time, obviously, and Marty Friedman,
Eric Johnson,
Jason Becker, and Eric Johnson. Yeah, because you know there were all sorts of other guys. You know, like David Chastain was putting out a lot of albums, and what's the guy with the two next
Michelangelo.
Michelangelo. You know, most of his albums were kind of crap, right? I mean, the guy was an amazing player, but you couldn't listen to that stuff. But yet,
man,
McAlpine and the Vinnie Moore stuff and a few others were really, really musical and melodic. And I think, you know, it had the chops, but it had the compositions to back it up. So cool. All right, Stephen, you're number one from 91.
So now after you guys have all shit on 80s era Rush, the album that got me into Rush, my brother had compilation cassettes of various things, and I liked them. Probably didn't understand them. I was probably too young at the time to really understand them. But the album that really clicked for me was A Show of Hands. I just absolutely loved that album. I played it a lot.
Live.
Yeah, that's a live album. However, that was 89. So then Presto came out the same year. I liked it. I didn't love it. But then in 91, Roll the Bones arrived and the guitars came back out. And yes, there's lots of synths on it. There's lots of keys on it. There's lots of pedals on it. But Alex is back in the band here, really. And I really like Roll the Bones. I was lucky enough to go to Cinema Strangetude last week. So R40 was shown at cinemas. I don't know if it was anywhere else, but it was shown at cinemas in the UK here last week. And I went along and sat for 3 hours and watched Rush live on stage on the big screen. And it was absolutely fantastic. And I must admit that with all of those classics, and that's a great performance on that show, that this was the album I came home and played, because this is the one that really clicked with me. This was the first studio Rush album that I thought, okay, I'm in now. I absolutely am in now. And yet, I would agree there are stronger eras, stronger albums, but this one means a lot. I played it a heck of a lot. I've never really always been a lyrics guy, but I love some of the lyrics on this album. I think it's underrated in that sense. When you're 18, throwaway lyrics like, why are we here? Because we're here, roll the bones. You know, that just made an impact on me. But just things like, you know, learning that we're only immortal for a limited time and things like that, which is in Dreamline. I love that line as well. And they played really well to me at that age. The Big Wheel, that's a great atmospheric song. Where's My Thing, which is a fantastic instrumental, one of my favourites of theirs, which has got the one bar that's got 5 beats in it that when I used to play the drums along with it, used to fucking annoy me something fierce because I could never remember where it was. I could until you sat me behind the kit, you know, and it just dribbled out of my ear at that stage and it used to drive me insane. But yeah, I love this album then, I love this album now. Geddy Lee still can't rap to save his life, so what that was all about, I have absolutely no idea, but thankfully they play it up when they do it live and there's silly people doing it behind them on the screen, usually famous faces that you know. So I think they also acknowledge that, well, why did we do that? But they've made a thing of it as Rush do. So yeah, Roll the Bones, my number one. This is, yeah, played it this week, still love it.
It's the only time I ever saw Rush. And I actually had tickets that were so bad that I could barely see them, and I was surrounded by a bunch of fucked up idiots, you know. So I couldn't really pay attention to what was going on. But what I did see from the band, they were awesome, man. Is that one of their best albums? And so, is it one of their worst albums? No, but it was a great show, you know, at least for what I could see of the show, instead of fighting people in the stands. It's one of those albums I could understand where you could have gotten to it, but it's a pretty good album.
Yeah, the album that got me back into them as well. So I, you know, kind of Presto, I really didn't like at the time. I'm still not big on, but when that album came out, the silly rap notwithstanding, pretty solid album. I think really great tracks on it.
I had tickets to see them on that tour, and due to some family emergency or whatever it was, and I was gallant enough to decide that yes, I would rush to their aid and help. Idiot. I didn't see them, but I thankfully did see them twice after that. And I'm delighted that I did. And as I say, saw them on the big screen last week, and it's as near as we'll get now. And it's not often that you sit in a cinema and feel the need to applaud in between songs and things. And there's, you know, people chanting in the right places. And it was fantastic, I have to say. It was a great experience.
Which was the tour where they had like the giant washing machines on stage or something?
They used that for a few. That was in the R40 show that I watched.
That was the second time I saw them.
Yeah. What I quite liked about the R40 show, which was one of the final tours, I think, is that they dismantled the set as they played. So the roadies came out and so they had the big false wall of amps that everyone's got that are not plugged in and never were, you know, and they just burst the myth. So they would come out, so there was like 12 marshals on this side and all the bass amps on this side, and the roadies would come out after a song and just take off the top line and move the heads down. And so by the time that the show is finished, they've got an amp each sitting sideways on a chair with a microphone over the front.
That's when they play the early stuff, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's when they play the early stuff at the end. So yeah, that was great fun.
I saw them. I think it was the Hemispheres tour. Hemispheres.
Nice.
Well, I don't know. It was 80 or 81. So maybe it was after the Hemisphere.
yeah, that was moving pictures actually.
That's moving pictures, yeah.
I guess that's probably when I saw them. It's Nassau Coliseum.
Yeah.
Good time to see them. Wow.
Yeah, I saw him on moving pictures too at the Garden,
Mm.
which is pretty cool. And yeah, Chuck, there is nothing worse than being at a show of a band you love and you're surrounded by sloppy buffoons, man.
Oh,
There's
man.
nothing worse than that.
Oh, I wanted to just throw somebody off the.
You probably should have.
Oh man, it's bad enough that the seats were terrible, but then you had people standing up and singing and bumping into you. I'm like, come on, man.
Going to the bathroom every 2 minutes and coming back with more beer and back.
Oh man, it was terrible. And this is before they renovated. Actually, no, but yeah, they hadn't renovated the Garden to the way it was, and I just had crappy tickets. I wanted to see them so bad, that I just paid for whatever was there.
Right? Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that I regretted it because I finally got to see them, but I wish I would have enjoyed it more than what it was. It's probably one of my least favorite shows, live shows that I've ever been to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one thing to go to a concert and have a couple drinks or whatever and to enjoy yourself, but man, to go and get completely obliterated where you're just closest to everybody around you. I have no.
Oh man! You just
Granted, I might have been one of those guys too when I was a teenager, but in the more recent years, I frown upon that. That's just, to me, it's just like, stay home and do that.
Oh man!
Let the people who want to sit and enjoy this.
I saw Led Zeppelin at the Garden in '77, and there was a young lady sitting behind me, and she was just hitting a bottle of Wild Turkey, and ultimately they wound up carrying her out. She was unconscious.
Just the thought of that.
My worst experience with that was at Spock's Beard. And there was a couple who had come from Aberdeen, which is around 100 and something miles from Glasgow. So they'd made a day of it, And they were shouting at the band in between every song and screaming for what they wanted to hear. And the band played along for a little while, and eventually they started to get ignored. And the guy shouts, "Do you understand how far we've come? We've come from Aberdeen to see you." And some guy at the back says, "They've come from America to play for you." Shut up. Right. It was in a really low stage. And there was the microphone stands, and of course, all the picks and all the various little accoutrements were on there. And this woman was doing this. So drunk, she's swaying round. And the only thing that she's got to hold on to not fall over is the microphone stand. She's holding on to the microphone stand to hold herself up, right? And you can see everyone just getting more and more fraught on stage because she pulls that over. It's a disaster.
Oh, exactly.
Eventually she lets go, and I kid you not, she just went straight down, straight through the curtain at the side of the stage, right into the guitar tech, who shut the brick, right? I mean, he had no idea. He couldn't see this. She just landed on him as he's tuning or changing a string or whatever he was doing. And her husband went, anyway. I mean, he was as bad as she was, but great gig.
Well, was this with Steve Moore still at the helm? Was he still?
Ted Leonard was in the band by that stage.
Oh, by that line, okay.
Yeah, so we're quite far down the line by that, so it's reasonably recent.
One of my favorite ever shows was the first ever time that Neil Morris and Neil Morris led Spock's Beard played at the Bottom Line back in 2000, if I'm not mistaken, 2000 or 2002, one of those years. And they were outstanding. I regretted not staying for the second show. One of the best shows I ever saw. I literally was right there at Alan Morse's feet, and we just had a great time of it. Spock's Beard, I've seen them 6 times, and every single show they've always put on a great show.
Yeah, great band, phenomenal live band.
Yeah, no matter who's in the band, who's singing, they're always spot on.
Yep, exactly.
Great music. I mean, they're great musicians. All these guys, they're always on the road.
Great guys too.
So like Rio, he played. I think he plays down in some of the bands with some of the musicians down in Atlantic City.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, like these guys, like they'll tour with like Peebo Bryson. You know,
Yeah. Mhm.
They're always
I mean, that's how they make a living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You got to do.
You know,
Yeah.
you got to play. You got to be able to play.
All right, Ken, you're number one from 77.
All right, this is a little bit of a tribute to Anthony, since this is he came up with this idea. So my number one, but not really my number one, as I said, Andy's going to be my number one. Zappa in New York.
Nice. Mhm.
Recorded
Madison Square Garden.
recorded in New York City, 1976. It was an expanded lineup. Had the Brecker Brothers, had some of the horn section from the Saturday Night Live band, and Eddie Jobson was the keyboard player.
Mhm.
Funny enough. So it's a nice cross section of material. You get some of the old Mother stuff. They're doing stuff like Big Leg Emma, which goes back back in time, and then you have other tracks that were part of the Leather album, which was the 4-album set that got shelved by Warner Brothers. Don Pardo is the announcer, and I mean he's
outstanding on that.
he's right. I mean it's fantastic, and for me, I mean there's so many highlights on the album, but for me, it's got to be the Illinois Enema Bandit.
I was going to say the same thing.
I mean, you know, the music, it'll just blow you away, and the story will have you pissing yourself. It's just, you know, I mean, it's just, it's just a great live album. And also, I should say, at the beginning of the show, I mentioned the music box. I got this at the music box for $3.99. I just peeled the sticker off before, and yeah, and also one other thing about that album, it's a fantastic sounding album.
It is, yeah.
So for rock albums,
well recorded.
Just great recording, and one of my favorite Zappa albums.
Isn't there also, there's a killer version of Cruising for Burgers on that too, isn't there?
Beautiful. Oh man, Brecker kills on that.
Is Cruising for Burgers on here? Not on this one, but you know there is an expanded version.
Maybe that's I might have it on my CD actually. Yeah,
this has got titties and beer. I mean, you know, you got the Black Page, but that third side, Honey, Don't You Want a Man Like Me, right into Don Pardo and the story of Michael Kenyon, the Illinois Enema Bandit. That's just.
You guys know how many times in my life I have been asked if I am related to Don Pardo?
Really?
A bunch.
Like a million. At one point I got so sick of hearing that question. I was like, yes, he's my uncle. Wow, how cool is that? Have you ever gone onto the Saturday Night Live set? Blah 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like I gave up on that too after a while.
I have a customer whose last name is San Martino. How many times has that guy been asked, hey, is Bruno you related to Bruno?
Yes, and Pardo's not really a common name by any means, but of course there
is.
That's
exactly.
But for New Yorkers in the New York area, the East Coast here, I mean, Don Pardo has been that voice that you've heard on NBC for a million years. Nobody knows what he looks like.
Saturday night.
Yeah, right. It's just, no, I am not related to him. For everybody watching. All right, my number one. So this band has got mentioned a couple times already, and this was technically their first full-length debut. They had an EP that came out before this that got all of our attention and knocked us all on our ass. And I love this album, and this album, probably for me, when I look at the catalog of this band, this is neck and neck for me with Operation Mindcrime, and that's The Warning by Queensryche. I mean, this is just intense, moody prog metal, really intelligent stuff. Musically, there's some great guitar work and some nice, intricate passages on here. I mean, Jeff Tate on this is just amazing. I mean, you really couldn't touch this guy in the 80s, going into the early 90s. So many great songs. Some of my favorite Queensryche songs are on this album. No Sanctuary, so good. Enforcer, the title track, Take Hold of the Flame, top to bottom, really good, great sounding album. That's my number one.
Lyrics too.
Yeah, really good.
Mhm.
It's just good. You know, they used to call this back in the day like thinking man's metal. You know, the Seattle guys playing the thinking man's metal. You know, shortly thereafter, they were like, well, one of the first prog metal bands and blah blah blah. But yeah, definitely they were on a different kind of playing field for some of the other metal bands that were popular at the time. Like they definitely didn't sound like the Scorpions. They definitely didn't sound like Judas Priest. Maybe Iron Maiden was kind of circling in that sort of area. Fate's Warning soon to be right afterwards, right? So yeah, I mean, just a really, really cool band that were doing something different. They had that vocalist, they had the twin guitars, the tunes were complex yet very memorable, and then they would, with the next album, Rage for Order, they would go and kind of do something completely different, which is really cool too. And then of course the big magnum opus to follow that. So yeah, that's my number one, Queen Joy. Anybody got any honorable mentions you want to rattle off?
What's it from 88? I have Metallica's and Justice for All. Saw them twice for this tour. Brilliant. And what's that slightly off? What's a Sonic Youth? The Daydream Nation, we're pretty much the Velvet Underground of their time, which that's what it always seems like that's what they wanted to be. All right, those are my two.
George?
My one is actually the debut from Joe Satriani, Not of This Earth. Not really a big Satch fan going after this, but that one I always liked. I think the songwriting on it's better than what he would. You get a little sing-songy after that, and I don't really care for it, but that debut is really good.
But his debut is kind of like Vi's debut in a way. Yeah. It's very different from everything that came after it. Kind of like avant-garde in spots. Very cool.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Steven?
It was two extremes for me. The only other two albums that I could kind of place from 91. So you're between eras in 91 because the big boys are kind of doing things like this. We Can't Dance, which is an honourable mention for me because actually Vicky, my other half, played this an awful lot back then. Yeah, I know. However, I quite like it now. And what I will say is the drum sound on this album is phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And a little quirk that I really like is I think the cymbals are hit about 3 times across the whole album. But as a drum album, it's phenomenal. As a Genesis album, it's a nice pop album more than anything else. And then what's coming afterwards in the 90s hasn't really started, but the Galahad debut, Nothing Is Written. I don't think it's one of their strongest efforts. I think it's much more derivative of what had come, but it signals for me a path into the UK scene that would follow from here because, the neo-prog of the 80s was starting to sputter a little bit, and this was the start of what was going to come after. So those are my honourable mentions.
Cool. Ken?
Well, yeah. If you guys will indulge me, because 77, as I mentioned, is a lot of stuff.
Okay. A lot of great live albums.
Well, a lot of great albums, period. I don't know if this is coming through pretty well, but Pete, you spoke about this the other night.
I did.
Island Pictures. I'm tearing the house apart trying to find my vinyl copy of it, which is embarrassing since I reissued it. Great Swiss dark prog album, little twisted in places. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree.
Next. These are all winners. Kansas, Point of No Return, 1977, right? Classic Kansas. Some people don't like this one, but this is one of my favorite Renaissance albums, Novella.
No, Novella's excellent. Yeah. I love it. I love it.
I mean, the first time I saw them with Radio City, 1977, Sea Level opened up for them. Sea Level sucked, but man, Renaissance was great. Well, sorry. Utopia, Rock.
Big fan. So another one for Anthony.
Yeah. Saw them at the Calderon Theater on the Raw tour. One of the great live shows. I mean, I could tell you crazy stories about that if you want.
With the costumes and everything.
Oh, so can I talk about it a little bit? Do you have time?
You can. Sure.
So this was. I went with my friend Stu Greenspan, who has been my buddy for 40 some odd years, and he brought a couple of his friends who. He had a driver's license. We crammed into his little Mercury Capri.
Wow.
We drove out to Long Island, and we all got kind of baked. And I don't remember who opened up, but the way the show started was each guy in the band had a home movie, and there was a giant screen in front of the stage. So they were doing their home movie, and then eventually smoke started pouring out from underneath the screen. and the screen comes up, and there's Utopia, smoke all over the place, and the pyramid comes together, and it just kind of comes together, comes to a point, and they're wearing costumes. Todd's wearing his silver outfit or something, and we're sitting there, we're watching the show, and they were phenomenal. They were just great, and I'm sitting there, I was pretty stoned, but Stu's friends, they were going mental. I had never seen anything like it. And I said to them, I said, are they smoking what I'm smoking? You know, and it turned out they had dropped acid. And I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea. So I'm watching the show. And then, of course, it was a great show. But then they do Sing Ring and the Glass Guitar, the big piece. Yep. And so each element was a different member of the band. And if I remember correctly, Roger was he was, I think, fire.
All right. I think Rundgren was fire because he played his guitar solo with the fire part.
No. What about this? I'm very clear. I think he was air. Todd was air because I'll tell you why. Well, Willie Wilcox was water because when he was doing his drum solo, every time he hits on water would come up, you know. So and yeah, Roger was I'm pretty sure Roger was fire, and Qasim was, I don't know what the hell he was, wind. I don't remember what the hell it was. So I don't remember what it was. But Todd climbs the pyramid. That's why I think it was air, but I could be wrong, you know. And he climbs up the pyramid, and he's playing the glass guitar. And when it takes the solo, and then he does a flip. He was on a wire, of course, on a horn. Right. He does a flip off the top of the pyramid, and I mean, we all lose our shit. I mean, it was like, you know, it was great. So anyway, that's my story. I got more. It's my only Fusion album for tonight, because 77, for whatever reason, it wasn't actually a great year for Fusion releases. So Brand X, Moroccan Roll,
in my opinion, their finest hour. Phil Collins at his peak.
Yeah. I think they were great, and I saw them back then. It was this tour. It was 77 was the first time they came over. Pat Metheny. Bottom line, right? No, I saw them at my father's place. Oh, okay. And Pat Metheny, the Pat Metheny group opened up. With Danny Gottlieb, Mark Egan, and
Lyle Mays.
And I was like, who the fuck are these guys? They were good. And, you know, Brand X was great. And Brand X came around a lot, you know. Then they had the two keyboard players like Robin Lumley, Peter Robinson. And then Good Soul had Tendinitis. They came around with, was that Mark Miller, I think was the guitar player?
Mike Miller.
Yeah, Mike Miller. Yeah, it was great. All right, on to more. Locanda della Fate, they were kind of like a one and done. I mean, they reformed and made a shitty album a few years ago, but this was 1977. This was really the end of Prog in Italy. It was 77. I mean, it hit the wall real fast in 77. It died off. I can't think of maybe an Aria album from 78, but they were very much in the like Banco or PFM style. They were great albums. Some people think it's the best Italian Prog album of the 70s. I wouldn't go that far, but it's
wow.
But it's, I mean, no, it's not, but it's really good.
Top 20, yes, indeed.
England, Garden Shed. So, funny story. I picked this copy up in a strip mall in Florida. It was a store that didn't sell used albums. This was like in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, and it was I'm just poking around, and this was just sitting in the bin, sealed. Very weird, like it'd been sitting there waiting for me for about 20 years. Great album. Well, I guess maybe if you want to call this Fusion, but it's really not. Potemkin Triton. This is the second of three. I don't know if you're familiar with Potemkin, but they were really fantastic French jazz rock band with, I don't want to, maybe a little avant-garde tendencies, but
not Magmas, right?
No. Even Pete would.
I like those albums. Yeah,
you have it. Right? You know these albums, Pete, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how would you describe them. To me, I think of them as like jazz albums, jazz rock albums, but they got a little hair on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not quite fusion, but it has those tendencies. Yeah, it's
got a little bit of a raw energy to it, and it's really good. That's what I got. There were more, but it was getting crazy. I mean,
yeah, there's so many. I know. I hear you.
77 was a
77.
great
It's
year.
like, geez, you got the best year out of all of us, I think.
Oh man,
The hardest
My,
stuff.
what do I got? I didn't bring out any props, but I got Steve Hackett Till We Have Faces was from '84. Palace,
I love it.
was '84.
Mhm.
Roger Hodgson from Supertramp, his solo album In the Eye of the Storm was '84. That's true.
Nice. Mhm.
Frank Zappa, Them or Us, XTC, The Big
I like it.
Express, and gotta throw out David Gilmour's About Face.
Nice.
Album.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Anthony's gonna love
album
this
from
show.
'84. Cool. Well, we got to thank Anthony for this. This was a good idea, and his man even made an appearance today, so you got to love that, right? It wouldn't be a show without an Eddie Jobson mention.
It's mandatory, isn't it?
It's mandatory.
Yes.
I tell you, we got to mention John Sykes on the Hudson Valley Squares, and Eddie's got to get mentioned on this show. So that's how it works around here. And of course, we got a Magma reference as well today. So because
Did we lose Pete?
Uh-oh.
Like it.
I'm here, you hit my hair. You good?
Oh man.
My internet connection is unstable. Can you guys hear me? Hello?